In this episode, I'm talking to Nicola Lutz about independent schools, admissions, and sales. Controversial word. You're going to love this episode. Let's dive into it right now. Take it away, Clive.
Welcome back to I'd Rather Be at the Beach by Simon Jones, who runs the Bonjour Agency. If you work in an independent school, then this is the podcast for you, where we don't talk about work, but we do talk to people in the independent school sector. It's fun, it's fascinating, it's fabulous. So let's jump into it.
Nicola, welcome to I'd Rather Be at the Beach. Thank you for being here on this episode. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I'm very well, thanks.
Well, it's dead fun to have you here because you just told me before we hit record that you live in Whitstable. That's pretty close to the beach itself, isn't it?
And in fact, I was at the beach this morning. So I took the dog on a little walk, went to the bakery, went to the beach. Yes, so this is very appropriate.
What kind of dog have you got?
I have an old greying cockapoo called Bilbo.
Bilbo, as in Lord of the Rings, Bilbo Baggins, I presume. Yeah, very good, very good. How old is Bilbo?
He is 11.
Oh,
very grey around the muzzle, bless him.
We all know that feeling.
Not many are totally aged.
Of course. Nicola, tell me about yourself. Tell me about what it is that you do, for the sake of anyone listening to this who maybe doesn't know who you are.
Okay, so I have two hats, actually. So my own business, No Fluff, I started about 7 years ago. So professionally, I help schools and education consultants increase their sales. And then my other hat is a director of study travel. And I've been there for 28 years, which seems like yesterday, but 28 years of study travel, heading up the sales team there. And they have events and magazines and a network for the sector.
Okay, all right. So study travel, what exactly is that then?
Study travel started off as a print magazine coming out every quarter, bringing together agents with educators, whether that is in language or secondary or tertiary, and agents from about 130 countries around the world. And we've continued that. We just do it in different ways. So we have a network, which is a bit like LinkedIn for the sector. We have 15 conferences around the world, several of which are specifically for the secondary sector, and the rest are mixed sector. And we still have a magazine, but it is now monthly and online. So it's still sent in print to many agents that never venture out of their own countries even, but they get the magazine. So it's nice to be able to reach all of them and help them.
And you just mentioned 130 countries. I mean, if someone said to me, Simon, sit down and write down 130 countries, I honestly don't think I could do that. I don't know how many I could. I might try this one day, actually. I don't know how many I could write down, but I don't think it would be 130. I don't know how many countries there are even.
I don't either. It's 130. Maybe it's 129, 130. And I don't write them down. They're all in the network and on a spreadsheet somewhere. So it's not something I would be writing down and spending my time on.
Mm-hmm. And is that in a bid to connect agents from those countries with schools predominantly in the UK?
No, globally. Absolutely, globally. Yes. So most of the agents I work with and that go to study travel events and read the magazine, they will send, for example, to UK boarding schools, but they might also send to Canada and Australia and New Zealand, and they might send to summer schools in Italy and Argentina. So it's truly global.
Wow, gosh. And I'd never thought about it much being the other way around. So are there agents in the UK that help to find places for children in schools in Canada, for example?
Yes, there are. Not as many. It's not as well known, this sector in Blighty. But yes, there are. And obviously we have a lot of online agents that will advise on these things too. But yes, we have outbound. I think the first one I ever came across was an agency called Cactus, who were at the time based in Brighton. And they specialised at the time, this is 30 years ago, on sending people abroad to learn Spanish in Spain or Latin America. And you could go and learn Spanish and then go volunteering or go through the Amazon or something exciting. So that's how I first came across them. Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a little bit later about No Fluff, because you mentioned about increasing sales, which I thought was a great term that you used, but we're going to come back to that shortly. But tell me, how did you get into schools, and why schools instead of working in a completely different sector?
Oh, well, originally, study travel is how I got into this industry and built my network, and we deal with mainly schools and agents, and I was more on the school side. So that's how I got to know a lot of schools, so that my network is there. I'm very invested in what they do. I can't think of anything better than working in the education field, where you help people grow and also help international understanding, because I've been mainly in the international side. So mixing cultures together in a school, I just think is brilliant. And I've been part of my degree was studying abroad at different universities in Spain and France. My kids have done it as well. They've studied abroad. So the qualities and skills that you come back with are valuable, let alone the actual education acquisition, if you like, the acquisition of a language or whatever it might be. So I really value that. I love what schools do for community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no good at running a school, and I'm no good at teaching teenagers, for example. Can't imagine anything I would rather do. So I help other people do more of that. That's where my little bit comes in. So that's why school.
So tell me about your own travel then. I mean, where have you been in the past? Which countries have you experienced?
Well, some of them I don't really experience the whole country, because if I'm there for work, quite often I'm down in a hotel room for a couple of days and only get to see a little bit of light occasionally. Many. So Argentina was a favourite, Brazil and Colombia. And then I'm not as well travelled in Asia. So I've been to Thailand, for example, Singapore, etc. But I have traditionally in my roles gone to where the schools are, the main markets. So Canada, US, obviously the UK, Australia. First time in New Zealand is next year, so I'm excited about that. And then France, Italy. I'm going to Croatia in a couple of weeks for another event. So lots of exciting places.
I'm glad that you mentioned Colombia when you mentioned about Argentina and Brazil, because historically I've always got Colombia mixed up with Cambodia, which are completely different parts of the world and completely different cultures, I imagine, because I've never been to either of them. Tell me a bit more about South America. What's the appeal about those countries there?
Wow. Well, it's such a huge expanse of culture. I used to think of Latin America as kind of being Latin America, one big culture, and obviously each country is so different and has its own nuances of the language, etc. So as a Spanish speaker, that's quite interesting, because I think, oh yeah, I used to think I could speak Spanish really well, and then I would go to Argentina, for example, where actually it's quite a clear Spanish. So that was okay, and then I go somewhere else and just think, actually, I don't understand what they're saying. I need to learn more. But the culture is amazing. I don't fully understand it, and that's part of the appeal, is that I don't really understand all of the cultures there. I haven't travelled extensively enough. Some of my industry buddies have, and they'll know a country really, really well. Like a friend of mine, Kevin, knows Uruguay really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And has travelled extensively. I'm not at that level, sadly.
Of course, on a previous episode, not that long ago, we had Sam Pitt. He's from Chile. He's an agent out there. Great guy. But I saw recently a map of Chile overlaid on top of Europe. And I had no idea that Chile was quite as long as it was. I mean, it's such a long country. And I often find that about countries in South America where, and largely Africa as well, where I'm looking at them on a map thinking, I couldn't have told you like the shape. I mean, Brazil, we know the shape of Brazil, and Chile, of course, but other countries, I couldn't tell you what the shape of that country is like, or how big that country is, or what the culture is like in that country, or if I was dropped in there, how it would feel to be there. I've got no idea at all about so many of these countries. So I'm in awe about your knowledge of these countries in South America and the Far East as well. Is the Far East somewhere you'd like to experience more of?
It is, but I would like to go for longer. So quite often I fly in, do a few days, maybe a week, 2 if I'm lucky, and take holiday and fly out again. So I don't really get enough of the flavour of it, which is such a shame. So Asia, I would love to go and spend some more time there and travelling around, particularly Japan. We have an event in Japan, and I've actually never been, I'm ashamed to say, so I would love to go. I would love to go, and but with somebody that understands the culture and can show me around a bit, because I feel it's very different to obviously my own culture. So I would really like someone to help me with it.
Yeah, otherwise we run the risk, don't we, of sort of landing in Tokyo and then wandering slightly aimlessly around like a tourist, maybe being taken advantage of because we're a slightly clueless tourist, and then quite possibly missing out on some of the real gems in the country which we may have been one street away from, but we had no idea about.
Exactly. Or we don't know why something is, and having someone explain to you. I think that about art as well. I'm not very arty. My sister is very arty. And if we go to a gallery, if I went to a gallery or some sort of exhibition, I would think, oh, that's nice. And this, but if I go with her and she explains what went into it or the thought behind it, it just opens up so many other doors. And so I think having someone to help you with that is really good.
Okay, so Nicola, in your experience then of speaking with people in schools, people who are in marketing or in admissions, I'm saying that because largely they are the people who are listening to this podcast episode right now. What are the three things that you're hearing from them? Things like common concerns or any frustrations that they have. What are any common themes that you're seeing in schools?
One of the common things I'm seeing, and one of my frustrations actually, is that the admissions teams work really, really hard, and are given tons to do. They keep piling on the things to do, so they never really have time. That's the biggest concern I hear. And yet they are responsible for converting the leads that they get in, the inquiries, through to actual admissions. And yet they've had no real support in that. So they aren't given the skills. And that, for me, is a sales skill, converting an inquiry to a sale, if you like, or an enrollment. There are certain processes and techniques and hacks and approaches that you can use to make that just so much easier for them. At the moment, I think there's a bit of, we don't have time to learn anything new because we've got so much other stuff on our shoulders, but yet some schools are relying on them to get the admissions in. So that's one. The other one is the attitude towards sales and selling, is that it doesn't really have a place in the independent school sector. And I get that because it's got a bad rep, right? Sales is just sleazy guys selling double glazing or snake oil in shiny
or secondhand cars.
Secondhand cars, market stalls, Del Boy, all of that. And there is a place for that. That still exists and it still does very well, but it's not really got a place in education. But we just borrow from other sectors and cross-pollinate it with the loveliness that we have in the education sector to get more of those students into the schools that they need to go to. So no student should be left behind there. If they're a good fit and they tick all the other boxes, then we shouldn't be stopping at one follow-up, for example. We're not doing them justice, and certainly not the school justice. So I think those are the two biggest concerns, kind of we don't need, and I think actually a lack of understanding is probably a lack of understanding that sales is a professional skill set. It's not just talking loudly and in a brash manner to people and being charming. There's a lot of process behind it. So introverts are some of my favourite salespeople to train because they generally will listen really well, which is a huge advantage in that situation. People that are really good at customer service, excellent. But we also want people that are good at process, that like following a process, like to tick all the boxes, and I can work with that. That's good.
So tell me more about this approach then regarding sales in an independent school. And I'm thinking that you used the phrase leads/inquiries, but you led with the word leads, whereas I think a lot of schools would naturally say inquiries, possibly because they don't want to be seen to be using the word leads, because it does sound a little bit like it could be perceived in a negative way. But why should schools be more focused on the professional side of selling, as opposed to, dare I say, employing? I'm thinking about a traditional school where maybe they've employed the headmaster's wife to be the person who's in charge of admissions. For anyone listening, by the way, who is a headmaster's wife, I'm not saying that you don't have the skills in doing your job professionally, but maybe they've been placed in that role without too much of a second thought, because it's more of a filling the chair perception as opposed to it being a proper job.
I always feel I'm going to open a bit of a can of worms here, and this is
go for it. Do it.
So the company's called No Fluff for a reason. Is I'm quite direct. An inquiry is a lead. Okay, which business or school or agency or whatever you're in, an inquiry is a lead. If it's going to turn into money, potentially, it's a lead. We can call it an inquiry if that makes people more comfortable, but it's a lead, and leads cost money. So every inquiry you get has cost you money already. And the idea is that we want a return on that investment. And again, very business speak, but that's what it is. If we're asking people to spend 40, 50, 60,000 pounds a year times however many years, we're selling a high ticket service. That's what we're selling. And I don't think it's the fault of the admissions team if that is the case. It's not been perceived as a role that is particularly professional or particularly skilled necessarily. It's quite often, and I feel bad, I think I'm going to get some backlash for this, but let's do it anyway. So I think it's been seen as an admin role where they react to inquiries and they send out information and, down to all the details of an open day, for example. And they actually do really, really well. The ones I've met are just really good at what they already do. And they've not had the skills given to them to convert. So, which is obviously what I do, but also the people above them that are hiring them are not hiring for those skills because they don't know that they're important. So the head, for example, hasn't been in a commercial sales environment. They don't know that they need someone to, as I would say, drive the team towards the goal. Who's driving is often my question. Who's driving your team towards those targets? And what is the action plan to convert? And no one's ever asked those questions before. And it sounds obvious in a few questions, but so it is difficult. There's nothing to say that the headmaster's wife, as you put it, in the admin role cannot be taught these. They're all very intelligent, very capable people. They just haven't necessarily been told that there are other ways to do things. And if the school leadership team are open to learning those skills, then off they go. That team are off and away. And just having someone to focus them in on converting more, giving them a process. Follow this, do this, on this day, this is what we're going to say, off you go, makes life a lot easier.
So you've mentioned the word converting twice, at least twice there. Tell me more about some of the areas where you see schools missing out and maybe not converting a lead or inquiry, if people are more comfortable with that, not converting that into a sale.
Yes, so there are so many examples. Okay, so from the last few schools I've been into, so one that really worries me is from offer sent to offer accepted. So the offer is sent, and by this point, everyone's jumped through a load of hoops, including teachers and head teachers and all sorts, loads of hoops, and the offer is sent. So the family are receiving probably a few offers from various schools, but then it's left. No one really gets back to them. There might be an offer holders lunch, something like that, which is good. But generally, there's no more real following up, as I would call it, after that. But by this time, it's cost a lot of money and a lot of time on everyone's part to get them there. So I love plugging that leak. So what are we doing post-offer or as the offer is sent? What are we doing to maintain engagement and encourage them to accept the offer? What's happening then? And an offer holders lunch actually is a good starting point. But what touch points are they going to be? Who do they need to speak to? How do they need to feel at this point? Do they feel valued if you just give them an offer and think, well, you'd be lucky to come to our school? That's not the case anymore. It needs to be a bit more competitive, unless you have a big waiting list, obviously. But
And do you think that gap that you call it is there because people are slightly scared to follow up for the negative perception that it might give on their school, that they're being perceived as being a little bit desperate? Or do you think that these admissions people, they send out the offer, they're not being chased anymore by that parent, therefore they're now responding to where somebody else is chasing, either externally or internally?
I think it's a mix. So I have heard this, that we don't want to seem desperate. So I work a lot with the teams that I go into on when we are going to follow up and how we are going to do it. We're not just going to say, "Are you accepting the offer? Go on then, accept the offer." We're not going to do that. But we could, right? But we're not. And we don't want to issue the offer and then follow up within minutes, because that does seem a little bit desperate. So we work on timelines and it's tailored to every school. So there is a bit of that. But also, no one's really done it before. So the habit is the offer is gone and then it's something gone out and someone will accept it or they won't accept it. And that's just the way it is. So no one's really been, and also no one's had the time to explore how else can we do this. So that's one area. Another area is from the inquiry coming in to registration, usually, or whatever that next step is in the school.
Yeah.
And the inquiry comes in, and usually we send a load of bump out to them. Good bump, but bump nonetheless. Loads of information, probably 5 to 6 things for them to click on and look at, which is what I would call a call to action. Too confusing. If you want to speak to them, you're likely to convert them more, get them further on, but also find out if they are a right fit for the school. If you're just responding to questions, you're not asking the questions you need to find out if they are a right fit for your school. And if they're not a right fit for the school, you just pass them on to another school or whatever it might be. So you're not using up time on prospective families that aren't a fit. But if they are, you then give them the love and care and attention that they need along the journey, which often is done through meetings and chats and phone calls and consultations, I guess you would call them, to show them what's going to happen, answer their questions, and that kind of thing. So actually, a lot of it is customer care and qualifying, I would call it at this point.
So what would you say to someone in admissions right now who maybe is under pressure to fill spaces in the school, especially with the looming threat of VAT right now, and then somebody inquires and in their opinion, the admissions person's opinion, that child isn't a right fit for the school, to use your words. How could someone in admissions get that balance right to hold off that pressure from senior leadership team, but also bear in mind what the real correct thing is for the child?
Again, this depends school by school. If they're inundated with inquiries and they think someone's not a fit, then they might focus on, if you were scoring them out of 10, so we were only going to follow up with the 8, 9s and 10s, for example. If you're inundated with leads, if you're not and you're scrabbling around for places really, then you're going to have to follow all of them up. So I'm a big believer in using the phone, if at all possible. Phone them, talk to them. We usually have a list of qualifying criteria, I would call them. So, what's their education level, what's their English level, if they're international, and whatever the criteria might be. And then we try and answer those questions. And if they fit, then we move them on to the next step. And then we do the next step and we move them on to the next step. We don't aim for the admission straight away. And open days is the other thing. So open days are so much effort. Blows my mind how much effort goes into an open day. And they're wonderful things. I want to go to more of them. They're fabulous. But one school I was at, they were having an open day, but they only had one admissions person that was going to the open day rather than the team of 4. Whereas I see it, if it were an event, any other event, a business event, you would have a team of salespeople, if you like, there to make appointments, to chat with people and see if they are qualifying leads and really interested, gauge interest. So changing things like that, not giving goodie bags away straight away, get them to speak to an admissions person so they can ask a few questions and see if they can make an appointment for a further chat to progress that inquiry along. So there are lots of little gaps to plug along the way.
And goodie bags, as you mentioned, are they a good thing or a bad thing? And what should people be putting in there? Should there be a teddy or not? This is a big question for a lot of marketing and admissions teams.
You see, I love a goodie bag. So I'm all for goodie bags. I keep goodie bag stuff for ages. I've got numerous teddies and things and pads and pens around. I know people that are very anti the teddy. I quite like a teddy. It gives them something to get behind. That's entirely up to you. You could test it. I think making up a mascot that doesn't really match your brand is a bit weird. So I find that a bit strange. But I think people like a teddy. I don't think we should get rid of the teddy altogether.
Mm-hmm.
I think
controversial. Yeah. Okay.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. But they are expensive. I think if it were a choice of having teddies and getting some skills, some courses and things behind your marketing and admissions team, I would go for the latter. If there's a direct choice. If there's not, then do it all. But investing in giving your team that are marketing and selling your school actually is more important than a teddy. But a teddy is much more fun to buy.
Yeah, it is. It is indeed. It is indeed. Yeah. Okay, Nicola, tell me something about No Fluff Fest. This is an event that happened earlier this year, and I think you've got another one next year as well. But tell us what that was all about.
I do. It was like organising the student recruitment, sales and marketing event that I would want to go to. So it was so much fun. And we were very happy to have you there. So that was lovely. And
I was very happy to be there. It's a great fun event. It really was.
And it's had an impact. And I think that's what everybody wants actually in life, is to have an impact. So the people that went, it had an impact on them and they walked away with more skills. So No Fluff Fest is it's about selling. And I know that sounds wrong, but I'm ready for it. It's about sales. It is also about lead generation. So it does cover marketing, but it's much more about the lead generation side rather than the branding side. So how are we going to convert people to come to our schools? So it's about that. So we have about a third actually are international agents, a third are independent schools, and a third are language colleges and tutors. And we all come together and we listen to some awesome speakers such as yourself and external speakers. And the idea is you should come away from every session with a list of things that will increase your sales. That's the point of it being No Fluff Fest. So you should come back with a list of how to edit a video, for example, in your case, or from my case, how to progress them from one stage to another stage of your pipeline. We had Susan Fun telling us about WeChat, and we had someone else telling us about TikTok and how that's become a search engine, and all sorts of things. So the idea is it helps you get more bums on the seats. Frankly.
Awesome.
And it is in Manchester next January at a really good venue. The venues are always quite vibrant and a bit different, deliberately so, so that you come out of January feeling energized and refreshed with a load of ideas that you can implement.
We will need that in January for sure. And this is going to sound like a sponsored episode now. It's totally not. But where can people find out more about No Fluff Fest in January 2025?
They can either go to nofluff.biz or nofluff-fest.com, or they can follow me. I'm prolific on social media. You can't get away from me. So just follow me, Nicola Lutz, on LinkedIn or whatever your preferred channel is. But the more the merrier. We've already sold half the tickets for next year already.
Oh, so wow. Gosh.
Super chuffed. So yeah, the word has got around. We've got people flying in from Hong Kong and Oman and Italy and Switzerland and all sorts of places. So I'm really, really chuffed.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put a link to those in the show notes for this podcast episode. But in the meantime, Nicola, it's been great having you here on I'd Rather Be at the Beach. I should leave you to get back to the rest of your day, whatever that entails, even if that's another walk with the dog on the beach. But thank you so much for being here. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure chatting to you as always.
So you've just reached the end of this episode. If you would like to have a podcast in your school for your own school marketing, then zip on over to www.thebonjouragency.com. We get your school podcast up and running, and we keep it going for consistent episodes coming out regularly. But if you don't want a podcast, then you're still welcome here at I'd Rather Be at the Beach, because we're just like a big family here. Anyway, the next episode's coming out soon, so click that option to follow or subscribe. It just means that you won't miss it. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.